Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dharmashastra National Law University, Center for Criminal Justice Administration and Research. Today, we are having an esteemed guest to talk with us in our inaugural session of our podcast related to the challenges in criminal justice administration. I am Animesh Jha, Assistant Professor of DNLU and Assistant Director of the Central for Criminal Justice Administration and Research. And today we have with us Dr. Supradip Sarkar, who is an Associate Professor in Jamia Millia Islamia University, a central university in Delhi. He has been an expert in the matters of disaster management, human rights, jurisprudence, and has enormous experience of teaching as well as other academic activities. He completed his LLB from Calcutta University and subsequently did masters and PhD from the most esteemed National Law University of India, Bangalore, National Law Schools of India University. And now currently he's teaching since he has teaching experience of 10 or 11 years, working as associate professor, taught in North Cap University, as well as MS University. Now he's with Jamia and he has authored a book. You'll be most interesting to understand that he has authored a book known as the Disaster Management, the International Respect of Disaster Management, forwarded by the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Deepak Mishra, then Chief Justice of India, Dr. Deepak Mishra. And today we are going to have a discussion on a very important topic, that is legal framework in containing COVID with special reference to Disaster Management Act, Epidemic Disease Act and Indian Penal Code. We'd like to start this interview, this podcast, by first of all thanking Dr. Sarkar for giving us his time. And the first thing I'd like to ask Dr. Sarkar simply to begin with, sir, that regarding the change system of criminal justice administration, the problems we are facing, can you list the challenges that we are facing? Then we will begin with the whatever the solutions, what can be the suggestion, what can be the way forward. Over to you, Dr. Sarkar.
Yes, see, one of the challenges that we are facing in this regard is that this Disaster Management Act or the disaster management itself has never been taken so seriously as it has been taken in COVID-19 case. So all the things that is coming up before the court, before the even the government, these things are very, very new things. So what is happening is that the kind of legal problems that we are facing for the first time. Even though the act is almost now 15-year-old, we have so long, the IPC is already there, the Epidemic Diseases Act was there, but so much of discussion has never happened in this regard. So there are lots of challenges that has happened. Even for many people, they are reading the act for the first time, this Disaster Management Act. So these are like the initial remarks I can make with regard to the challenges, and maybe once we go through our discussion, I can bring up one after another the issues that being asked.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. This is a big problem that we understand, that no one has before this act. No one saw this as a big problem, that the unawareness regarding the Disaster Management Act, specifically the penal provision section 50 to 60, the provisions regarding that. First, we will come to the Disaster Management Act, of course, sir. The first question that I would like to ask you in this regard, the specific question, the particular question, that whether there has been a confusion regarding whether this current COVID pandemic, can it be described as a disaster within the meaning of Disaster Management Act, sir? Is it a disaster?
In fact, the whole definition of disaster, if you see in that act, the Disaster Management Act, which is there, and under section 2D, it means a catastrophe, a mishap, a calamity of grave occurrence arising out of natural or man-made causes by negligence or accident, a substantial loss of life and human suffering. They also talk about degradation and the damage to the environment, and which is important is that is of such a magnitude which is beyond the coping capacity of the community or the affected area. So if you look at the definition of the disaster as given in the Disaster Management Act, it is quite a wide definition. Now you also know that the government has declared it as a disaster,
Yes.
as a notified disaster, right? And if I can quote what the government, and there was a March 20 notification, and what the government has said is that in that notification, that keeping in view the spread of COVID-19 virus in India, the declaration of it as a pandemic by the World Health Organization, the central government has decided to treat it as a notified disaster and announced to provide assistance under the State Disaster Response Fund. So this is what the notification of March 14 March 14 actually talks about. So this is how you can see, this could be an academic discussion that whether this is a disaster or not a disaster, somebody trying to find out a fault. Oh, pandemic was not a kind of disaster. But if we don't do that, what else we will do? So
Yes.
I think it is better that first of all, legally it is very much possible to declare it as a disaster, and second is that not including it as a disaster takes us nowhere.
Okay, sir. So is it necessary? It's the only way forward to include it as a disaster. That has been a question, sir, because the pandemics are not included in the list. Now, the sir, next point.
No,
Yes,
we will also come to this point. Maybe when we talk about the Epidemic Diseases Act, unfortunately, there are also no definitions in the Epidemic Diseases Act, which we can discuss later on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The next thing that I wanted to discuss in specific reference to Disaster Management Act, sir, that the authorities that are being used to give notifications, sir, that are coming from these local authorities, sites such as DM, district magistrate, they are issuing the notifications in lockdown and all. Whether a lockdown or something is possible in relation to Disaster Management Act or not, sir? The lockdown that we have, yes, sir.
So far the act is concerned, what has happened, I give you a little bit of background that how this entire thing has happened. See, what happened is that on March 11, 2020, that the center invoked this Disaster Epidemic Diseases Act that took combat this virus in India. And what it said was that it advised the state and the union territories to implement the provision of Section 2 of that act, which we will discuss later on. So that's what the central government did. And along with that, in that same notification, what they did was that the center gave some of the powers which were held by the Home Ministry under the Disaster Epidemic Diseases Act, that to be delegated to the Health Minister to prepare India against this outbreak. So this has happened on March 11. Now on March 14, as I told you, that there is a notified disaster that came in. Now, so far the lockdown orders are there. So the lockdown orders, what they did was that this lockdown order was done under Section 6 of this particular act, on the Disaster Management Act. And in this lockdown order, what they have done is that they have there is that the NDMA, the National Disaster Management Authority, so in its powers given under Section 6(2)(I) of that act, I will just try to read that one, that which was the genesis of this power. It says that the national authority may take such other measures for the prevention of disaster or the mitigation or preparedness and the capacity building for dealing with the threatening disaster situation or disaster as it may consider necessary. So that is how they have said that such other measure. If you technically or legally look at it, it's a kind of a residuary power. But and under that, the NDMA actually gave the order for this lockdown. And then what happened was that, acting on that order, that the Home Secretary, he is also the chairperson of NEC, which is the National Executive Committee,
Yes, sir.
another important body under this act. So under section 10(2)(l) of that act, they issued this direction and guidelines in response of this disaster. And they also talked about the strict implementation. Just to tell you what it says is that NEC can lay down guidelines or give direction to concerned ministries or departments of the Government of India, the state governments and the state authorities regarding measures to be taken by them in response of any disaster situation or disaster. So this is how this entire thing has happened, because the NEC also, in the same section, there is a power that has been given to the NEC. It said that it shall assist the national authority, means here the NDMA, in discharge of its function, and has the responsibility for implementing policies and plans of the national authority and ensure compliance. This is important. Ensure compliance of directions issued by the central government for the purpose of disaster management in this country. So this is I'm just telling you that the legal background on the basis of which these lockdowns were the lockdown order and the different guidelines they were issued. Along with that, if you look at the first order itself and subsequently this one, so what they said was that you were mentioning about the disaster management certain that sections, penal sections. So these were also included, that in case of non-compliance, these sections would be invoked, and also that section 188 of IPC, which is basically disobedience to follow orders by public servant.
Thank you, sir. This is a very important question, that the legal framework of Disaster Management Act and how it has been ensuring the validity of the lockdowns and all. One question that I wanted to ask you, sir.
Before we leave this question, I just want to give you one reference which I think is important. See,
Yes,
we were discussing about that whether it's a pandemic, what is the declaration, because in our Disaster Management Act, there is no provision for declaration of disasters. Okay. This is one of the problem. I will just try to draw an analogy from, say, for example, in US. They have this Stafford Act, which is primarily their main disaster management act. What they do is that they don't call it disaster management, they call it emergency management. Because for many of them, disasters cannot be managed, only emergencies can manage. Now in Stafford Act, what happens is that there is a specific provision for presidential declaration of disaster. Now what is that? Importance of this provision is that once the president declares a kind of emergency as means a national emergency or whatever, as an emergency of grave nature, so the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is equivalent to NDMA of ours, they get involved, and the federal funds are available to the states. So that kind of arrangement is unfortunately missing in our own Disaster Management Act. That's why I was telling you that the genesis of these lockdown orders were primarily given under a residuary power.
Yes, sir. No primary question is involved. I will, sir, also have a question regarding, sir, we don't have a provision for national emergency or something on these grounds of a disaster. Like Article 352, if you want to involve, there is no question of...
No.
There is absolutely no question of Article 352, or even Article 356 can be involved or not, sir?
No. I don't think. There is, means now if the states are not listening to the center, not obeying the center's orders, guidelines, that could be a matter of problem. But to invoke these emergency powers, I am not sure that whether that is the correct situation.
That is the correct situation.
We may probably, legally and theoretically speaking, we may do that one, that it's a constitutional breakdown of the state machinery, and that's how we do it. But I think that that would make the situation worse. Means it
So,
would,
of course,
it
that will
would
be attack on federalism or something, sir.
yes, it would, that what will happen is that instead of doing disaster management, we will do into a political management. It would be
Yes.
a political disaster. So I don't think that's the right way to do that one. But having said so, there are enough provision in the act itself which can be used in this regard.
Yes, sir. That is correct, sir. We don't want an additional issue arising out of already a derailed situation that we have, sir. That is correct, sir.
Means what I am trying to say is that at this moment we don't want a political disaster as well. Means we must deal with this disaster situation in a cooperative manner rather
Cooperative.
than going head on with the governments, the central government saying something, the state governments trying not to do this one. So I think that's not the right way to deal with disaster.
Yes, sir. After you have explained the mechanism of disaster management authorities and all, I want to ask you a question that, sir, many of us don't know. A very ancient kind of act. Of course, Disaster Management Act was enacted in 2005. Many of us, including you, have been following that act. But one act that was considered obsolete or kind, that is Epidemic Disease Act of 1897. People say that has been just for the case of Bombay plague they have enacted and has lost its relevance, lost its true teeth and fangs. People say, do you think that act is still relevant? Tell us about something about that act, sir.
So I will also. This is good that you have asked about this Epidemic Diseases Act. Let me give you a flow that how this whole Act of Disaster Management Act 2005 also came into
Yes, sir.
being.
Yes.
Before that, what I would do is that as you have mentioned about this Epidemic Diseases Act, see this you are correct that this act was enacted in this in during the British era to control this bubonic plague which ravaged this Bombay presidency in
Yes.
1896. Now, one of the things which is very ironical is that even that plague also had their epicenter in China. And this
Okay.
Western Yunnan province, which was the epicenter there, and that was already killing thousands in China. Now I tell you how this disease traveled to India. See, that time that opium was a very lucrative trade.
Yes,
And what
sir.
happened was that there were merchant ships which were in China, particularly in Hong Kong, for this trade purpose. And the rodents, which were the flea-infested rodents, which were actually the carrier for this disease, they got into those ships. And that's how these opium-laden ships, merchant ships, they sailed to India, and that is how this disease came from India to from China to
China
India.
to India.
And exactly what happened during that is pretty unfortunate that two disasters which are kind of more than a century apart, but the response was kind of the initial response was kind of same. Now in that case also what happened was that during the early days the government did not do anything. You know why they did not do anything? Because they were fearing that the trade would be affected. Now that's what
Okay.
they did not do anything. Now what happened was that subsequently this case spiraled out of control, and once it spiraled out of control, then the British government actually hurriedly drafted this act. That's why this act is so short. And you can, I mean, this act was that time drafted to control this plague. And if we look at the spread of that plague, it was mostly in the northern and western India, and it killed actually lakhs of people in next few years. And one of the place which was most affected was the Pune. In
Pune.
January 1897, there was a large number of residents which succumbed to this epidemic, and half of the population even ran away from the city. So, in the pursuit to contain this epidemic, in February, the British government appointed one person called Walter Charles Runn as a plague commissioner of this city. And to suppress this plague, what Rand did was that he restored to brutal measures. So what he did was that, and sadly, when we see some of the pictures and videos that police is beating up people and forcing people to do hop-ups and standing in the public having posters that, oh, I am an enemy of this one. This is actually what Rand did in Pune. So what it was that he deployed forces to barge into the houses, upset their belongings. His troops actually stripped men, women, children naked for checkups. Sometimes they were in private, sometimes in public, and then they were evacuated to hospitals where they were quarantined. So the local population was outraged because of such measures that the plague commissioner did. And this Bal Gangadhar Rao Tilak, what he did was that he gave voice to the feeling of the citizens, and he wrote that the plague is more merciful to us than the human prototypes that are reigning in the city. So his writings eventually inspired these Chapekar brothers. There were three brothers, and they shot dead run. They were later arrested, tried, and they were hanged. And Tilak was also arrested and imprisoned. In fact, this is the time when he made that very famous quote that Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. So this is what exactly happened during that time, and I'm just giving you one background of this.
Very interesting to know, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the historians have severely criticized this act. Many of the historians, and they said that maybe the British were not able to understand the customs and the mindset of the Indians at that point of time. So this is kind of an history behind this epidemic diseases act.
Yes, sir.
And
was those brutal measures effective at that time or not, sir?
See, there are two ways to look at it. One is that yes, you can say that when you have this fear psychosis in the mind of people, so some people will be terrified and they will follow the orders and guidelines and all those things that are there. There is another downside also, because you are so brutal, because your things are so handled so in such an inhuman way. So I may not even report to you. So there are
will hide information.
Yes, there are cases of hiding information, and the thing is that there is every possibility that I may not report, and this has happened even during COVID time also.
Yes,
and
sir,
you know that there were certain suicide cases also, that people once they were so kind of you are kind of projecting them as criminals, that I have this disease as if I am a criminal. So that I am is, in my opinion, is a counterproductive. That should not be there. Instead, what you will do is that you should inspire confidence in the people that what you might have got this disease, but we are there to help you. And there's a Arogya Setu app also. Primary thing about this act is that many people are thinking that it is mass surveillance. They are not able to put enough confidence that okay, whatever is being done, that is the government has some ulterior motive. And if you also notice another thing, that in the lockdown 4.0, the government has also come down on this Arogya Setu. It is not mandatory now.
Oh,
not
unfortunate.
Yeah,
the government has taken a step back.
Yeah, because they have understood that you have to gain the confidence of people when you deal with these diseases. I'll give you one example in Taiwan. Right, Taiwan, what they are doing is that once you have quarantined a person, so the government is following up and checking how you are doing. Do you require any basic necessities? So that is how they are bridging the gap with that patients. Means you may say that, oh, it's a large country, all those things may not be possible, but there are a lot of things that are happening that may be averted.
At least we can talk.
Yes, we can talk. In fact, yesterday only I was looking at a video which has emerged from UP. I think it's from Allahabad, that the quarantine centers don't have electricity, don't have water. Now there are conflicting versions. They are saying no, the water is there in the tank, but there is some electrical malfunctionings, and that's why the water could not be provided. But they are claiming that it was not there since night before. So you understand that that kind of things are happening.
I'll ensure you, sir, there is not much conflict. I belong to Bihar, of course, and there are quarantine centers in Bihar with no facilities at all. People who are very close to me have been observing as doing service work in that areas, and they have a very conclusively first-hand information they have given me that the situation is not very good there. Of course, they don't have infrastructure, and the government is also not having willpower to serve the people in quarantine center. So people are running away from quarantine center like anything. And that is the one problem that we have, sir. So Epidemic Disease Act, sir, we obviously said it was a very interesting. Yes, sir, we are following that. Sir, Epidemic Disease Act, the question that I wanted to ask, just the one thing that in continuance of the previous question that we had, that regarding the question of Epidemic Disease Act, what's the contemporary relevance of the same, sir?
So before I say something on this contemporary relevance, let me also give a very brief overview of this act. See, this act is it's one of the shortest act in India. It has just only 4 provisions. As I told you in the very beginning, that the definitions. So what the act says is that this is a law to provide the prevention of spread of dangerous epidemic diseases. But nowhere these diseases, that epidemic, dangerous, right, outbreak, these are not being defined, right? So this is one of the problems in this. In this act. Second is that if you look at the section 2 of this act, what happens is that it gives the state government the power. Remember, it gives the power to the state government to take special measure and to formulate regulation that which the people will observe, and the purpose is to contain the spread of the disease, including inspecting people and segregating suspected patients. So they have talked about inspecting people traveling through railway, and all those things are there. But at the same point of time, what happens is that this particular section also gives that it empowers any person. Now, mark it. It says any person to take such measures, right? Which is very wide in nature. And because of this section, now in case of COVID-19, that the cabinet secretariat advised the states to invoke this section 2 of the act. And so that what happens is that all the advisories of the Union Health Minister can be enforced on ground. Now, this is something which you have to understand, that when we are talking about any section, so are we also talking about these volunteers who were also helping the police? Because I come from West Bengal, and I have seen people who are so-called, there is a concept called civic volunteers in West Bengal.
Yes, sir. Volunteer forces.
Yes. So they are also with lathis and dandas. They are also beating up people, right? Because along with the police, they are not the uniformed police of
yes, sir.
Right. And what happens is that this act also empowers the central government to inspect any ship or vessel leaving or arriving any port. Now we have to also take into consideration that there is no mention of aeroplane, because that time it was not in vogue.
It was not there.
Yeah, and it is very surprising that it has not been amended since then to include this one, unless I saw it in the regulations that of 2020, that regulations I saw that one. And then there is section 3 of this act, which talks about the penalties for violating the regulations. That is according to that section 188 of IPC. And then there's there is section 4, which is kind of a legal protection of implementing officers under this act. So this is what this act is about. If we just look at the 4 sections of that act.
Very briefly, sir. Yes, sir.
Right? And yeah, you asked another question along with this one.
Sir, the contemporary relevance I was asking that you have answered already. Sir.
Okay.
The next yes, sir. You contemporary relevance. You were saying.
Yes. Of this act. See, in my opinion, it is a completely outdated act.
Yes.
Right? It's a completely outdated act. It has no relevance whatsoever in today. Yeah, and I gave you the history also of this act, that this act was very hurriedly drafted. And I told you that situation in this hurriedly. It has been criticized also by many historical accounts, and still it survived over a century. So, in my opinion, it does not have this one. If you look at this act, there is no elaboration on the rules and procedures for arriving at a benchmark, how to determine even a disease as an epidemic, right? It's a kind of a guidance document. Max, you can say that one, because it gives like a overview of powers. It gave very wide powers in the hands of the government. And what is most important thing that I tell you about this act is that there is no rights for the patients. There is no case of informed consent. There is no liberty issues. There is no right to privacy issues, right? And it's a kind of an emergency response statute. It does not talk anything about preventive thing, right? So, and that is kind of, I don't think that it's a relevant act in 2020. Right? It is not. It should have been replaced. There has been a bill to even replace this act, and another controversial thing is that the devolution of power to any person, as I mentioned,
person, that is a vigilante action by the people. That is one big grave concern.
So I don't go by this act at all.
That allows for vigilante and unfair action, unauthorized action, sir. That we can clearly understand, sir.
Yes.
Coming back to the issue that we were discussing about the under Disaster Management Act, we have already discussed regarding the wholesome approach regarding the lockdown, sir. That is the fifth topic that we have to discuss. That what is the legal basis you can see? We have already discussed in the respect of Disaster Management Act, but any other act, any other provision that substantiates this whole lockdown and the curfew and the extent of this lockdown movement 144 CRPC, give us a brief idea about that. So there is much confusion regarding this.
See, why this means now I told you that this has gone beyond this Disaster Management Act. It has become more of a criminal kind of activities that are going on. Means the criminal law is there in vogue. If we even means what in fact. See, curfew can be imposed even in other situations also.
Yes, sir.
Right. It's another situations also curfew can be imposed. So there is nothing as such to add in this kind of situation. So you don't want people to come out, and that's why you are imposing curfew. But I don't think then we are not doing disaster management. Means if we are into all those things, then we have moved away from the disaster management. If we just to highlight few of the things that so far the act itself is concerned, the Disaster Management Act, if you see that you mentioned about these sections that 51 to 60, if you look at these sections, so there are certain offenses which has been listed down there. So these offenses are like, for example, obstruction of work of any official who is involved in disaster management, or any disaster management authority, then there is a refusal to comply with any direction by the government authorities. There is a section on false claim that
Yes,
with
sir,
regard
false
to
claim.
any loss suffered due to disasters. But remind me about this false claim. I will tell you something,
Yes, sir, I
how
will.
the false claim can be also a problematic area, right? And then there are misappropriation of money and materials provided for relief.
Really?
Then another important thing which is also there is that false alarm or warning,
False
which
alarm.
leading to a panic. And this time and again, this has been advised during this pandemic that you don't do that one. But in the process, what happened is that the government went one step ahead. What they did was that when some of the wrongdoings during this pandemic were coming up, government went to the Supreme Court against that gagging of the media reporting, and they said they have to first take government's permission to tell anything about this pandemic. Supreme Court fortunately and rightly rejected this one, that no, there cannot be pre-censorship. That is that one of the issues that are happened. But and if you look at these all these offenses that I mentioned about it, these are all non-cognizable and bailable offenses. Primarily imprisonment are from 1 to 2 years.
1 to 2 years.
And one more important thing was that there was in the act itself it is said that no cognizance of any offense except a complaint made by the disaster management authorities or any official of the government, that is required. Or there could be any person who has given a minimum notice of 30 days of an alleged offense and his intention to make a complaint before these authorities. Then only you can there can be a complaint regarding this one, and then the whole thing come into play, the criminal measures. But as you said, that if we look at what is happening in on ground, that reminds me of this plague days, and I
Plague
see
days.
WC run in picture, right? So the migrant crisis happened because they did not get a time to return. It was a very short time that were
Very
there.
short time, sir.
Very
8
short.
crore. And
Yes, so that was one of the and I must also say that I am not blaming the governments completely, because not only this government, no government has taken disaster management seriously. No government. See, disaster management is never a poll agenda. Never. You haven't seen any political manifesto which says that we will do some disaster mitigation. It is not in this one. So our mindset was not there. We were not ready for this one. So irrespective, you think that today if the BJP government would not have been in center, the Congress government would have been in center, almost the similar things would have happened. Almost similar things.
there is a very interesting point, sir, that I have to make. That back day I come from Bihar, from North Bihar, where Kosi River is a big problem.
Absolutely.
Kosi River, you know, sir, and at that time when the flood came from the Kosi and all our villages were affected. So the politicians, when we asked for, sir, that you make a barrage or make a dam to restrict that flood, the politicians in Bihar at that time, they used to make promises that if we will restrict the flood, where will the fish come? All of people,
yes, Lalu
all of
Prasad
you
Yadav,
people, North Biharis are so interested in fish. How will the fish come if we'll restrict this flood?
in fact,
this was the logic.
Lalu Prasad Yadav
Yes,
was
sir.
the chief minister at that time.
Yes,
He
sir. Yes,
made
sir.
this comment that you enjoy the fish. Not
yes,
only
sir.
that, because you have now raised the Kosi floods issue. I tell you what happened in 2008 in Kosi flood. See, before all this embankment was breached, there were ground reports. That there is a danger that is lying ahead, and there was I am forgetting the name of the engineer who was there. So he made several attempts to reach out to the chief minister's office in this regard, that we must do something to this one. He sent fax to the chief minister's office, and I read from a down to earth one article, that you would be very surprised to know that the chief minister's office did not receive these facts. The very fact was that the fax was out of order because the chief minister's office has not paid the bills.
That's unfortunate, sir.
And at the same point of time, the Bihar chief minister's office wanted to contact the Nepal government, because you know that the interlinkages between Nepal
Interlink
and
is
India
Kosi
on
Raj
food.
is
Yes.
Viratnagar. Yes, sir.
Yes. So they could not reach out to the Nepalese government because ISD was disconnected. And imagine this is happening with CMO, not for any other places.
District authority.
From CMO it is happening. So subsequently what happened was that the union government got into involved, but it was already very late. Very late.
Late, sir. I had to rescue my uncles from with boats. I was a little boy then, but still, my brothers and everyone, we used to get the boats and rescue people, our relatives, our family from that place. That
There was yeah, you wanted to say something.
that unless I think that I have experienced this firsthand, and
Yeah.
still that is not in a priority to the government. Disaster management is still not a priority of the government in that aspect, sir.
And that is what has happened, is that now these things have happened, and you see this one, we had discussed so many things about this offenses under the Disaster Management Act, but again what we are doing is that we are coming about to this curfew and other things. And if you remember that many of the state governments, they adhere to the central orders. They had strict restriction on pedestrians, street vendors, interstate vehicular transport. And there was one shocking statement which came from this Chandrasekhar Rao from Telangana. He had went to the extent of warning people that he will call out the army and issue shoot at sight order against anybody violating these measures. So
there is no difference between a riot and a disaster.
So that's what I'm trying to say, is that if we follow these things, then we are not doing disaster management. We are doing another kind of law and order problem, or say, for example, some other kinds of problems, that political problems, riots,
Violence. Yes, sir.
This is not how disaster management should be done.
Yes, sir. After we have discussed this issue of disaster management, one section that has again you have been also talking about section 188 of the IPC. People have been resorting to this section. There are thousands of FIR by the police for breaking the lockdown. Sir, tell us more about this section that is.
Yes, suddenly this 188 has become a
celebrity in IPC
section, and one of the most revered section than it is. It is an innocuous section, 188. Right. Suddenly what has happened is that this has become a consistent feature. You look at the orders, directives, notification by the government, whether it is state or central, they are adding this one. Now this is a penal provision, and this has been invoked for non-compliance of those things. This provision, what happens is that this, as we have already mentioned, this is an offense which talks about disobedience of an order passed by a public servant. Right. So if we even look at 188, what we will just to tell very briefly about this 188. So it happens that it provides any person who has the knowledge of an order passed by a competent servant by which he is directed to abstain from doing an act or certain direction with respect to property possessed or held by him, disobeys such direction, he shall be punished under this section. This is what the section says. And furthermore, if you look at this section, what it says is that if the disobedience causes the disobedience of the order causes or tends to cause annoyance, injury, risk to the person lawfully employed, the offender might face a simple imprisonment up to 1 month and fine up to 200 rupees. Or it also says that if the disobedience is of a greater nature, right, as to cause or tend to cause the danger or human life, health, safety, etc., the offender shall be imprisoned for a period of 6 months or fine up to 1,000 rupees. So this is what the this particular section actually says. But if you see this one, the way the section has been used and misused in the context of COVID is very unfortunate. Like, it has been widely used by the police for lodging FIRs. People who have stepped out of their house to go to ATMs, they have been booked. The migrants have been booked. You know, in Uttar Pradesh, I saw statistics that there were more than 15,000 FIRs against 48,000 people.
My goodness, that's a huge number, sir.
That's the kind of use or misuse, you can say, that this has happened. In fact, it is very ironical. The sections that I read at means the mentioned to you on the Disaster Management Act, in fact, they are more severe than this one.
Yes, sir.
They have punishment till 2
years.
2 years. Whereas here the punishment, if you see that it is up to 6 months. But instead of using those sections, this section has been used, and people are randomly, police is randomly lodging FIRs.
Police personnel, they don't have the knowledge of Disaster Management Act, sir.
No, and that is what I am trying to say is that the bureaucracy was not ready for this one. The political class was not ready for that. There is no knowledge about this act at all.
No knowledge, yes, sir. Obviously, there is a particular question regarding cognizance under Section 198, sir. Sanction its relation with 195, sir.
Yes. That is another twist in this regard. So what happens is that in this section 188, it's a cognizable offense, as we all know from the act itself, that it's a cognizable offense. And now for a cognizable offense, what happens is that 154 CRPC is applicable. So FIR has to be lodged, and after police investigation, the police, on the basis of the police report, under 173, the magistrate can take cognizance under section 190. This is the normal route.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but now there is a limitation which has been put on this particular section under 195, as you mentioned, right? So what happens is that this provision, they lays down a special procedural scheme, and what it said is that no court can take cognizance of offenses. There are certain offenses, I think 172 to 188, and that except with a written complaint by a public servant concerned or his superior, right? Even in that group of sections which is mentioned under 195, this is the only cognizable section. Rest are non-cognizable. Now, this has become a matter of controversy that whether FIRs can be lodged under this 188. So, as you also know, that there was a PIL which was filed before the Supreme Court.
Yes, sir.
It was filed before the Supreme Court, and you imagine, we were talking about only Uttar Pradesh. The PIL was dealing with around 75,000 FIRs. 75,000 FIRs under this 188 for this violation of the lockdown orders, right? So the petition also, the petition rightly said that there is a legal process which is there already under the Disaster Management Act, and it has been invoked, and this cannot be misused by the police. But however, the Supreme Court did not get into the merits of the case, and they said that no, they dismissed the petition and said this petition cannot be entertained under 32 of the Constitution, Article 32 of the Constitution. Right? This happened with the PIR. Now, with regard to 188, let me tell you about some jurisprudence that has been developed. So, in this regard, what happens is that we refer to a very old case, that ML Shetty versus RP Kapoor. This is a 1967 case. It is on the old CRPC. Now, what happened was that in that case, the Supreme Court very specifically said that the embargo which is there on this because of 195 cannot be raised prior to the time when the cognizance is taken by the court. Right? And they segregated two things. They said that the police power to investigate and the court's power to take cognizance are
different things. Yes, sir.
Two different. and they said that they cannot encroach on each other. I think this was a good decision that they said. But also at the same point of time, I must say that why this 195 also was brought in. This was that about so that there are no frivolous cases.
Misuse of power by the police. Yes, sir.
Yes. And then there is a 1998 judgment, state of Punjab versus Raj Singh.
Raj Singh.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And they reiterated the same position. Let me just
yes.
read out one of the important paragraphs from that case. It said that from a plain reading of 195 CRPC, it is manifest that it comes into operation at the stage when the court intends to take cognizance of an offence under section 190 clause subsection 1 of CRPC, and it has nothing to do with the statutory power of the police to investigate into an FIR which discloses a cognizable offence in accordance to chapter 12 of the code. In other words, the statutory power of the police to investigate under the code is not in any way controlled or circumscribed by section 195 of CRPC, which is very clear on this one. So I think from that aspect, we can't complain that why FIRs are being lodged, right? But you also know that there has been subsequent judgments which has also kind of created a confusion. There is also there is also one case which is also often referred to in this one, that is some Muniappan, that C. Muniappan versus state of Tamil Nadu. And this was a case where there were murder, rioting, loss of property, these all were involved. And then what happened is that in these cases that also 198 was imposed, and the court said is that this cognizance can be only taken as per 195 on the basis of the complaint by the public servant. So if it is not there, then the whole proceedings vitiated and will set aside. So here the court very specifically said that the legislative intent behind such provision has been that an individual should not face criminal prosecution instituted upon insufficient ground by persons actuated by malice, ill will, frivolity of disposition, and to save the time of the criminal courts being wasted by endless prosecutions. So this is what the court also said, that why this 195 was brought in. But there was a Madras High Court judgment, which is that Jeevananandam versus State. It's a 2018 judgment, which created some twist in this regard. So what happened was that in this judgment, what it held is that it gave a different interpretation of this section, and what it said is that the offence under section 188 IPC being cognizable itself does not enable the police officer to register an FIR. They said that because such registration on FIR has to necessarily end with a police report, and the cognizance of which basis cannot be taken by the magistrate due to the bar of 195. So what happened was that they gave a different interpretation of this 188. 195 has been specifically brought to take this one out of this one. But I think this is a High Court judgment, though some of the subsequently some of the judgment of that High Court has referred to this one. But I think that the law is pretty
clear after Raj Singh, sir.
Clear, yes, it is clear. So if you ask me that what is that law as on date it starts, there can be an FIR, there can be an investigation. With that one is a police report, which are actually not, none of these things are barred under 195. But for the cognizance, a written complaint of the this public servant, means the promulgating authority, that is must. So what the court can do is that the court can treat the police report as filed under that after the investigation as a relevant document for the purpose of a complaint case, because eventually it would be a complaint case.
Complaint.
filed in writing. The only precaution should be that one, that the court must indicate that the cognizance can be taken only on the written complaint and not on the basis of the police.
FIR. Sir,
Yes.
can we expect the Supreme Court to at least place a restriction on the arrest under Section 188? FIR and all is fine. But
yeah, that is true. Unfortunately, what has happened is that the reason that 195 was brought in, that no frivolous complaint, nothing, and this one. Now, what has happened is that now actually frivolous complaints and other complaints are coming in under 188. I think the Supreme Court need to clarify this position. Need to clarify this one, that so randomly FIRs. Otherwise, can you think 75,000 FIRs? We are talking.
In the Jabalpur, you will find very interesting that shops have been opened, but if you will go outside, the police will lodge an FIR against you.
In fact, I had to take my mother for dialysis. Okay, 3 times a week. Now one day this police stopped me and they said, "You get that? I already have all those letters from the hospital, but I did not get that pass." Right, and this police was saying FIR should be lodged. So I was wondering that you lodge the FIR, then we will see what happens. And let me also tell you in this, because we have discussing about this one, that how the bureaucracy acts with a non-application of mind. I give you my example. What happened was that I have to take my mother thrice a week to the hospital. Now what happened was that once the policeman was looking at the hospital letter and they were allowing me to go. Suddenly I was stopped one day by a cop, and he said that you do one thing, you get this e-pass so that it becomes easy, nobody stops you, which is a good suggestion that he gave. Now I applied for this e-pass, right? You know what happened is that e-pass, I applied it on 11th of April, and what I wanted is that e-pass till 30th of April, because by that time we got to know that jo bhi ho, this lockdown is going to be extended. So I did it, because see, for a dialysis, so long the patient is alive, you have to take to dialysis. The lockdown now goes for 2 years, I have to be there for 2 years. Right? So I applied for a e-pass and it was up to 30. My pass was rejected. And the most hilarious thing was that what is the ground that is in? It said that the period asked is too long. Now, how do I understand what is too long? One is that, and at the same point of time, they wanted me to upload documents. So the hospital letter was uploaded and my mother's Aadhaar card was uploaded as document as they asked for. Now, in this hospital letter itself, it is saying it is a life-saving procedure, and she is stage 5 patient, right? It is very clear in the hospital letter. Now when you say that it is too long, one is that either you tell me that what is the right period, that you said, okay, I can't give you till April 30, I will give you for a week, and every week you have to renew it. That I can understand. Or second is that how can you say it is not? You must see that it's a dialysis case, so it has to go on. So either way, you have not.
They don't read the document, sir. They, believe me, sir. They don't read the document.
So they have not even understood that matter. They have not even understood the matter, and they have simply said no pass guarantee. Now I continued my whole hospital to and fro journeys to the hospital on the basis of the hospital letter itself. And what I used to have is that every day I have that bill that is there with me. So I used to show them that, see, this is today's bill. So they never had
police personnel are considerate that way.
Yeah, they have been considerate to this one. But I am trying to say is that I tried out the government process, and I was being rejected without arbitrarily. And now you imagine somebody who knows the law, somebody who are educated are having this problem. You imagine about the common
man, sir. Common man. That's very unfortunate case, sir. That's true, sir. That's very unfortunate. Now, building on that, sir, the next point that we are saying, sir, the people who are intentionally, the section 269, 270, the people who have been responsible because of negligence or with an intention to spread the disease, if they do some kind of act, what is the penal provision or the penal mechanism for the punishment, or what do you think that is the correct position of law?
Yes, this has happened, unfortunately, and I tell you this. This has not happened in India. This has happened in US also. Means I'm trying
Okay.
to tell you that in other places also, they have come down and said, "This is my freedom of speech and expression, and I am out in the open. You can't do that." In fact, they went to the extent of having corona parties. Okay, so they have they are on the roads, they are on the beaches. They said that no, we don't want to abide by those quarantine orders. Now in so this is an, again we have to also understand, it's a country which is unfortunately managed by probably the worst president in their history, right? Crazy president. And second is that they have this whole thing about too much of rights, liberty things. You know that the gun culture in US,
In
how
US,
yeah. So that is another extreme case.
excessive freedom
In
can
fact,
make you animals.
we have to take it not with a pinch of salt, but a loads of salt, right? So coming down to our own country, what has happened is that yes, there has been quite a few cases where the people have disobeyed this quarantine rule. There has been instances people were just out for a joyride, right? So that is there. And most importantly is that certain times people did not report their travel history or have failed to
Yes, sir.
report
Correct.
their travel history, and they have in the process have infected people also. That is true. We know that infamous case of Kanika Kapoor,
Kanika
that
Kapoor, obviously, sir. I
yeah.
was about to point
And
out.
then another thing which happened is that this Tablighi
Tablighi Jamaat case.
case, that Maulana Saad, right? So partly, yes, they have done a very bad thing, and partly there was also this communalism which also unnecessarily came into this one. See,
Picture.
bad people are bad people, no matter
No
which
matter
community.
which community they belong to.
Yes, they belong to, and they have to be dealt in a strong manner. Now, if we talk about actions against these people, is that there are certain provisions which are there in the IPC, that is section 269, 270, 271, and 278. These four sections, if you see this one, that they are under this section, chapter 16 of the code, that is of offences affecting public health, safety, convenience, decency, and morals. You see, this public nuisance is also part of
There.
chapter. So what happens is that if you look at 269, what it said is that it is about a negligent act likely to spread infection of disease dangerous to life. And 270, if you look at it, is said malignant act to spread infection of disease. So one is the negligent act, another is that malignant.
Malignant act.
Now, so 270, that the word malignantly is used, that it talks about menstruation of the accused. So he is deliberately spreading this infection. So that's why the punishment is bit severe in 270 compared to 269. So the 269, what happens is that it is a jail term for 6 months and or with fine, and 270 is for 2 years with jail and fine. So we can actually impose these kind of sections in this regard. Other than that, I told you about two other sections. One is 271 and 278.
78.
So 271, what happens is that this is about disobedience of quarantine rule. So 271 talks about, and the punishment is for a jail term of 6 months or with fine, and or with fine. But however, if you look at the section 271, it talks about quarantine in vessels. So that time they are having these vessels, and they have not, means we are not talking about quarantine rule in the locality, but we can by
We can
logical
understand the
extension,
analogy, sir.
By logical extension, we can always say that. But it is a disobedience of quarantine rule, which the jail term is there for 6 months. And then there is 278, which says is making atmosphere noxious to health. And that is that voluntarily vitiates the atmosphere in any place as to make it noxious to the health of persons in public place. And that fine is up to 500 rupees. Right? I tell you that in this 278, in a very interesting case of 1999, there was a case that is K. Ramakrishnan versus State of Kerala. This was kind of the first case where public smoking was banned. Right? Smoking in public place.
Smoking in public, correct, sir.
Yes. So this is before even the Supreme Court judgment came in. Right, so they said that it is unconstitutional under Article 21 and 278 of IPC because it makes the atmosphere injurious for health of non-smokers who are present in the proximity. So this is just I'm trying to tell you that this how this 278 has been used. So you can impose this one also. Maybe what you can say is that that these are too light punishments. Can we make it grave? One thing is that not all the time that there is a punishment is grave, and that's why you don't do this one. I don't think that's the correct way to do it. And we have so many punishments for death, other things, long-term imprisonment. That does not mean that the crimes have gone down. Right. So this is one of the thing that I have to mention, that these are 4 sections of IPC that I want to mention them once again, is that 269, 270, 271 and 278.
278 was a new information, sir. Nobody talks about that, sir. I think.
Yes.
278 in this relation, sir, that a person coughing in the public with corona is also 278.
Exactly. So that's what. So when you say, means you have to. That's why you have to logically connect these dots. Like you are talking about coughing in public, you are actually making it dangerous for other people who are in proximity. So that's why they are saying that you use mask, right? So you have to. There must be some logical connection between this one. And again, we have 188 is there, and then as on date, this section 2 of the Epidemics Diseases Act, that is already there, which we have discussed.
The Epidemic Disease Act, the one part that we missed was, sir, the amendment, the recent amendment.
Sorry. Before we move to another thing, I also missed out one more thing, is that we talked about this Tablighi Jamaat case.
Yes,
right? You know that one, that there was another thing which was imposed there. 304 IPC. That was invoked in this Maulana Saad's case. So they included this one in the FIR against Saad and other people, that it's a culpable homicide not amounting to murder.
Who died then? How you can prove that somebody died? Causation, how will we prove, sir?
It is, yeah. See, these are, you are like putting these sections in the FIR, right? You are putting these sections into FIR. That's what I am trying to say, and I think both of us are in agreement on that one, that disaster management cannot be dealt with a criminal law.
Criminal approach, yes, sir.
So this is something which is, and you remember this one. This is something which means this could be another webinar or another podcast of yours. That how Kerala did this one. That Kerala how they did this one. It is not about all about force, brute force, other things. So it is about awareness. It's preparedness, long-time preparedness, right? All those things, general awareness. There, what is happening is that I tell you, when we were all watching Ramayana and Mahabharata, in that time in Kerala, I think at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, I may be a little wrong on this one, either of this time, there used to be a daily address by the Chief Minister in the Malayalam channel. Right, that this is how the situation is, this is what we are doing, so be with us. So you understand, to engage the citizens.
Engage the citizen.
Engage the citizens. And one also thing happened is that maybe this is a health disaster. Maybe Kerala has done well. Maybe if it would have been an earthquake or a flood, we may not do well, because Kerala already have this experience of Nipah virus.
Nipah virus, they have
Nipah virus.
defeated very effectively. Nipah virus,
Yes,
they have defeated.
yes. And second thing was that they were prepared much earlier than the rest of the state was. That's why they could flatten the graph.
The curve very soon. They very quickly flatten the curve.
And you know, I will all the audience, I will share a very nice anecdote from Kerala. I heard that I'm sorry, I'll not be able to recall the name of that gram panchayat, because you know these are South Indian names, very
difficult
to
pronounce.
remember.
Eastern people like us.
Yes, yes. So what happened is that in a particular gram panchayat, or maybe in a district itself, it started with a panchayat. So what they did was that suddenly the panchayat came up with one thing, is that they made umbrellas mandatory to go out in the go out. So they said whenever you move out of your house, you have to carry an umbrella. Otherwise, it would be a punishment thing. Now, what is that logic? And the Gram Panchayat started giving umbrella at a discounted rate. Now, what is that logic behind it? He's saying that, say, for example, I am walking with an umbrella, you are walking with an umbrella, there would be a distance.
Okay.
So, to maintain the social
distance will be there.
See, you can laugh at it, okay, you can laugh at it, but what is to be appreciated in this one, that they are thinking
out of the box. They are thinking, sir. Obviously, that's very effective,
right? So maybe you can say this is a stupid idea, but I am trying to say is that not by, you know, the policeman comes riding on a horseback and, like, you know, beating up people. It is not like that. They're thinking that, okay, if I hold umbrella, you hold umbrella, obviously there will be a meter distance. So you think that, you know, innovative way of dealing with things.
This umbrella idea is very good, sir. Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Very interesting to know, sir.
Yes.
So, sir, regarding the Maulana Saad's case and everyone, there is one question that people have been attacking on health workers, and the questions regarding the recent amendment in Epidemic Disease Act, sir, that the punishment and the reverse burden of proof, the very interesting points that has been raised, sir. People have been criticizing this amendment and also appreciating this amendment, sir. What is your opinion? What's your stance on that?
See, this is really one thing which has come today, is this ordinance. Now, I don't know what to say about this ordinance. See, if you look at this ordinance, no, see, there has been some attacks on doctors, health people, right? Which is deplorable, right? Which is never ever, nobody should even try to justify it, the kind of things that has happened to doctors and health workers, right? So what the government did was that they brought in an ordinance. Now, if you look at this ordinance, even this ordinance does not amend the main crux of the
Epidemic
Diseases Act. What it do is that it just make the attack on doctors and health workers a cognizable and a non-bailable offense, right? What I look at it is that it is kind of a knee-jerk reaction to some sporadic incidents of violence that has happened. And I tell you, if you look at various statistics by the Indian Medical Association, other things, these kind of violence even in peacetime also happen. I will come to that one, that there are laws for this one also. So this ordinance has been come. To an extent, I understand that some people had to be dealt in a iron hand, and this is what they are doing. But as you mentioned, that these ordinance, even they unsettle the settled principles of criminal law, right? That is what is not very amusing for us. Now, just about this ordinance, if we look at this ordinance, what they does is that it defines act of violence, harassment, public physical violence, damage to property, health service personnel. They give these definitions, right? All those things. They defines what is property, and in the property they also have said that mobile units are also included, that one. And what it also says is that whoever commits or abets commitment of violence against health worker shall be punished for an imprisonment from 3 months to 5 years, and with a penalty ranging from 50,000 rupees to 2 lakh. And if it is a very serious one, then 6 months to 7 years, and it is penalty is from 1 lakh to 5 lakh rupees. Right, and we also said that investigation was to be conducted by a senior inspector in 30 days. The court proceedings to be decided within a year, right? And of course that burden of proof was shifted. The damage to vehicles and clinics, that they have to pay the double the amount of market price. And if you are unable to do it, it will be arrears of land revenue and that revenue recovery act of 1980.
UP model.
Yes. Yes. Now tell me, one is that what great has this ordinance done? It has only tried to solve a very small problem, right? That is the attack on the medical fraternity, right, or health. Other than that, this ordinance has no relevance in disaster management. Absolutely no relevance in disaster management. Second thing is that this so high penalty you are asking. See, these are, you have seen some of the videos that have emerged. You really think that these people will be able to pay that kind of penalty, right? And we are talking about
property will be confiscated. Just like the government is doing.
Yeah, that's what, and some of this government has come up with similar type of regulations, right? And you are talking about 30 days time, court proceeding in 1 year. How long did Nirbhaya case took? With so much of media glare, such a heinous crime, right? Indian media, international media, everywhere this was there, and still it took years, and we are talking about within a year time to complete these things. So
what about the absolute reversal of burden of proof? Actus reus, mens rea, everything has been shifted.
This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable, right? Here only I am telling you. Here only I am telling you why this ordinance was not required. Why this ordinance was not required, or the ordinance could have been brought in some other way. I'll tell you what. See, this violence of against doctors, as I told you, is well documented. In many cases, for years it is happening. My home state, West Bengal, last year, there was a very bad case that a patient died and the doctor was severely injured, right? So the entire medical fraternity was wroth because of this one. It happened in that famous Neel Ratan Sarkar Medical College and Hospital in middle of Kolkata, right? So there was one death, and people came in trucks and beat up doctors, and one was critically injured, right? So this happened, right? So this kind of violence happened. Now I will tell you that there are 19 states in India which has a specific law against this one, and I have to look at the title of the law because it is very difficult to remember. The title of the law is Protection of Medical Service Persons and Medicare Service Institutions, Prevention of Violence and Damage to Property Act. This is the name of the entire act. So 19 states including West Bengal has this act. Short, it is known as Medical Protection Act. Right. So this act, what happens is that this act covers doctors affiliated to institutions as well as independent practitioners. And they said that it outlaws all attacks against physicians and damage to their property. And anybody who is offender, he can be get a jail term up to 3 years and a fine of 50,000. So my question is that when we already have such kind of you better better implement this kind of
Implement this act.
why to make unnecessary kind of a ordinance in this epidemic diseases? That's what I am saying, that it's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction.
It's a publicity stunt, some people have been calling it.
No, this is, I don't means, the only thing, that's what I'm trying to say is that none across India, uh, disaster management is not in the forefront of governance. Not in the forefront of government. And I'm telling you, I am being associated with this field for last, you can say, 15 years. I have never seen so much of awareness about this act itself. Many people even did not know that there is an act called Disaster Management Act and there is something called NDMA. Even today also they don't know what is NDMA.
It's very ironic and unfortunate for you that, sir, something like this has to happen so that people will be aware.
In fact, the book that you are mentioning about, when last year I wrote the book, if you look at the legal domain, so I'm not talking about other, because in other places disaster management has been taken more seriously.
And
like
your
for
book is
example,
about international implications of the same, sir.
no, for example, I can tell you about in civil engineering, in management, right? In, for example, in medical sciences, right? So there are emphasis about disaster management, but not in terms of law and policy. So when I was writing the book, you can see that there is very few books in this regard.
In this
And
regard.
that too also, I am not talking about a compilation, means an edited book. You will get very few books on law and policy, and most of the books on law and policy are, again, they are describing about this whole structure.
Number of things, one of which then will be disaster management.
Yeah. So
that is correct, unfortunate, sir. One thing that I wanted to ask, sir, that has been posed by many of my students as well, that, sir, health is in a state list. Issue is in a state list, and the central government is working. How do you think, sir, that whether we should put in the concurrent list or something of some amendment is required?
Yes, and I will tell you that where that amendment has also been brought in, right, which has unfortunately that has not seen the light of the day. See, this health is a very neglected. I'm telling you, health as a subject is very neglected, right, in India. You know that there are various statistics which says that only 1.29% of the GDPA, precisely, I remember this one, 1.29% of the GDPA that is being spent behind health. And this is much below than what the WHO want. They want something around 5%, right? And this India's GDPA, the expenditure of GDP is the lowest among even the BRIC nations and the other developed nations. And on top of that, when we are talking about health, and on top of that, public health is more neglected. Within that health, means this is an orphan, this is like a more neglected orphan, right? So I tell you what exactly happened, that why this health has become a secondary importance. That has a very long history. This history comes from this. There was a Bora Committee report of 1946. In this report, what they suggested the government to amalgamate the medical and public health services. So that what happened was that the incentive for a career prospect in the public health, that eroded. Then second thing what happened was that if you look at our public health programs, these are single focus programs like malaria eradication, AIDS, anti-AIDS program, or AIDS prevention program.
TB and all.
Such, yes, TB and all. So such initiatives, what happens is they discouraged a comprehensive public health system to function. These are like sporadic programs. This is happening. And second is that we have also, the third thing is that we have also separated the public health engineering from the health services, which is important. That public health engineering, what happens is that they look into many things. For example, managing the subsoil water drainage, control the vector breeding, safe disposal of solid waste. Fortunately, this has come back as a Swachh Bharat mission.
Yes, sir.
Right? But how do you club these two? That this is something which is related to public health. So this is This is one of the things that why this public health has got the secondary importance. And then, of course, what is the problem is that we don't have a public health act, right? There was a national health bill in 2009 which was drafted to encourage the state to prepare such act, but again it lost its steam. However, it is also said that it can also be said that that some states did have a law on that one. But here I will tell you that about a particular act, that is Tamil Nadu Public Health Act. And very surprisingly, this Tamil Nadu Public Health Act is an act of 1939, again a colonial era act. This is one of the better public health act that I have seen, and I tell you why it is better. First of all, that they have a separate directorate of public health. So they have a directorate of medical health, medical services, medical education, and public health. Right. So they have a directorate of public health, and they are being staffed by a professional cadre of trained public health managers who have their own promotion and other things. They are experienced in managing public health both in urban and rural areas. Right. This is one thing. Second thing is that they have a dedicated funding for this one. So I'm telling you that few years back, like I'm forgetting the year, maybe 2010 or like 12, this kind of statistics I saw. The public health funding was 38% of the total allocation, and which was more than the medical health. In fact, it was equivalent to medical education.
That's great.
Dedicated funding. Then what happened was that they had a workforce, trained workforce for this one, and there were incentives and responsibilities of public health manager, right? And then there were long-term planning that to avoid this one and how to eradicate diseases. I will give you one example with these people. When in 1994 there was a plague outbreak in Western India, this Surat and all places. So one team from Tamil Nadu was sent to Surat because these laborers were experienced in finding out rats and isolating their fleas. So they sent a team from Tamil Nadu, right? They were doing this one. And similarly, I will tell you another example. It has happened in Orissa also. After that 1999 Orissa super cyclone, there was a team of public health people who went from Tamil Nadu to Orissa. Right, so they have this expertise developed, right, for a long time. Now, sometimes what happens is that, see, first of all, there must be a law. Then the second thing is that whether the law is working well or not working well, it's a different case. But the first thing is that we don't have a law. And in this particular act also, there was an intersectoral coordination and support to local bodies like water supply, drainage. It's a very lengthy act. It's almost 145 sections are there. So if you see this one, so this act gets into all these issues. And you have to now look at it that once we have talked about the Epidemics Act and now we are talking about this Tamil Nadu Act. This act is more human. The things that I complained about in the Epidemics Act, you see that they must have thought, put their brain, and they have tried to rectify it. This act particularly says that entry of health officials at all reasonable hours as preventive measures. They restricted the entry of government officials between sunset and sunrise, unless the nuisance has been committed during that time. It has been in the act itself. And they also said that if it is in a dwelling house, the consent of the owner is required. And an advance notice has to be given to get into their house and deal with the nuisance. And they also, in this act, what they did was that they took into consideration the privacy and the customs of Indian communities.
People, of course.
Yes, while removing a woman suffering from any infectious diseases to any hospital for quarantine purpose, they said that this
staff is required.
Yes, this is, and this is what I am trying to say is that you see that one. This is, we are talking about an act made in 1939. That means during the British era, and this act, I think, this is a good model to follow. Maybe we can.
Tamil Nadu model of public health, sir.
Yes, the Tamil Nadu Public Health Act. Now, I also have to say something that the penal provisions have become obsolete. Like there's 100 rupee fine, 50 rupee fine. I can understand. That's, you are talking about
1939, and that's very understandable, sir.
So you can make a law and you can amend those things, those few provisions. But I'm trying to say is that the crux of the act is very nice.
Very good, sir. Thank you, sir. This has not been in the public knowledge, sir. By this podcast, at least some of us will read that Tamil Nadu Public Health Act. That will be very, very, very enriching experience, sir. I was unaware of that completely, sir. So most of us are required. We need to read that act, and let's see what changes can become. Coming on the final part of this podcast, sir, there is a public health bill, that Prevention, Control and Management of Epidemic, Bioterrorism and Disasters Bill 2017, that has been in controversy or discussion, as you can say. What's your take on that bill, sir?
Yes, we were talking about this relevance and the irrelevance of Epidemic Diseases Act, right?
Yes,
from the very beginning.
We were talking.
So this is a bill which was supposed to replace that act. Now, if you look at this bill, this bill will give you some kind of things like epidemics, outbreak, public health emergency, social distancing. Remember, all these things which are relevant today, the bill has these kind of definitions. And most importantly, the thing that I came across in this bill is that about this public health emergency of international concern. They have this meaning, and they said that it means an extraordinary event which is determined as provided in the international health regulation of the WHO. Of WHO. So this is that means now you imagine that we were trying to get into these small things, whether this is a disaster, not a disaster. See, there is already a bill which has already got into these issues even before this has happened, right?
Very far-sighted approach of this drafter of this bill.
From today's context, we are saying far-sighted, but the world was already dealing with such things. The SARS virus, the Nipah one,
Zika, Ebola.
Zika one, right? Ebola. So it is not that this is completely unexpected. Yes, maybe nobody thought that it would be so huge, but international disasters were very, very much in vogue for a long time. Now, also what happens is that not that this bill was also a very soft kind of bill. It was also a tough bill in the sense that it has given the state, district, local authorities to conduct examination, isolate people, quarantine, and authorized any official or person. Again, that thing I was talking about.
Any official, public vigilantism.
Yes, sir. Any official or person to inspect without prior notice. This one again, some things are there. But this is something which I find is that it is good to have this kind of provisions, but it must be subsequently ratified by a person concerned. See, I had to take this measure because of this emergency that has happened, right? So that kind of accountability is required. And then yes, you were talking about one thing, that whether we should put the health in the
concurrent list or not.
In this bill, it has said that the central government may assume all or any such powers that would be expedient and in the public interest.
Okay.
So it has a section of that one. So it gives that one. So the central can take over, right? Again, you may again go into this, and what will happen if this bill is considered as unconstitutional in a court? That we see. The only thing is that we need to have a appropriate deliberation on this thing. That what will happen.
But right? I think Supreme Court will also be rational in this respect, sir. In the best interest of the people.
Given this kind of things. For example, I'm telling you from 1st of June, different states are going to take different stands. For example, in West Bengal, they are opening up the religious places.
Yes, in Karnataka as well.
Yes, in Karnataka as well. In they are opening up offices, private and public both. Of course, they are saying that no, this is social distancing has to be maintained, other precautions has to be taken. But that's a different question. But the point is that is without giving any disrespect to any religion whatsoever, I think it is not immediately necessary to open up religious
Temples and
places.
mosques are certainly not necessary, sir.
This is not.
You can pray at home.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. There's a bit of problem with the network.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I was telling.
Yes.
The simple question we are asking, sir, that temples and mosque and churches, places of mass gathering and mass festivities.
They can wait. Not so important. When that is what I am trying to say is that the even today, the political class in various states are not being able to take this pandemic as seriously as it should. It can wait for this.
Certainly, sir. Certainly, that has been a big problem, sir. So the question, sir, that final comment that
few other thing that we stopped in between that I was talking about that bill, 2017 bill. So it creates an appellate authority against the orders of the central and the union government, the district and local authority, right? There is an appellate authority they have created. They have created this bill also prescribes heavier penalty. They have a overriding effect on other acts. So this act is there, but again, if this act comes, there is an overriding clause in the Disaster Management Act also. So I don't know which one to.
So the latter act will be, I think, will be enforced, sir. That
is true. Yes, later on, but I think we should take into consideration these things also. But what is also missing in this bill is that, and many of the activists have questioned this one, that the balance between the government's role in maintaining public health and human rights, this is missing. The consent, informed consent, this has no place. There is no emphasis on modern methods of outbreak prevention and disease control. So if you want me to conclude on this one, that this is better than the existing Diseases Act, but we need a more human legislation. And also one more thing is which could be a matter of problem is that here we are talking about management of epidemics, bioterrorism and disaster. Three things together, whereas there is already a disaster management act. So whether all these three can be dealt in one act, that is also another area which has to be dealt in. This is a act which can feasibly be implemented.
No, it should not be too broad so as to create distortions in the implementation.
Because they have brought in disasters also. Now, in my case, then it should be the other way around, that let this come as a part of Disaster Management Act itself, because now we are coming on a different act, and we are saying we are trying to again bring that disaster also inside. So I don't know how do you harmonize those legislation.
Two things, sir, and two extremes, sir. Disaster is a very civil and a different thing, and terrorism is a very other extreme that you can.
Bioterrorism, yes, exactly, and that's these are three different things, and we are trying. And if you look at this this bill is not also a very big one. I think around 10 clauses are there, if not 10 or 20 clauses. It means it's a small one.
Small bill, yes, sir.
It's a
And
small
of
bill.
course, for terrorism, I would want someone to be hanged, and for disease, I would want the violators to have a 6-month punishment. So there are two very great extremes, sir, that we can see in the same bill.
Okay.
So finally, sir, what we can conclude? What is the way forward, sir? Your concluding remarks on this, sir.
My concluding remarks would be that that India is in a very poor health, right? So
Yes.
government need to prioritize health, right? And if we want to win emergencies, uh, so if our health system is better, then what happened was that we will be able to deal. Now I am not talking about disasters. I am only talking about pandemics, okay, or health disasters, because that is what our focus is being.
Yes.
So if we are talking about dealing with such health disasters, we require our health system to improve drastically, right?
Yes, sir.
Second important thing is that this is also one of my observation, that when 70% of the healthcare is in private hand, how will the government deal with such disasters? So what is required is that we must involve the private medical colleges, hospital in disease surveillances related to public health. Unless
Yes.
we do so, we cannot do it. We are acknowledging, even all official documents are acknowledging the 70% of the healthcare is in private hand, and then we are trying
Private
to
hand.
do this one. So, in my opinion, there must be a mandatory requirement for recognition of all these hospitals and colleges, right? I don't know whether you are aware of that. Very recently, just I think 3-4 days back, the Supreme Court is hearing a PIL where the Supreme Court has asked the central government that why private hospitals which has been given land on free of cost can't treat these COVID patients free of cost or at a minimal cost. And it has actually
Yes,
ordered
they should.
ordered the
Government spends a lot of money on medical infrastructure for even private hospitals.
And
They,
they have ordered the center to identify such hospitals, right? And then again going back to that one, that this cannot be, health emergencies cannot be dealt with brute force. Okay, the way it is being dealt, right? We need to more we do it, more there would be a tendency among people to hide their cases, and that will cause more harm.
more
Uh,
problems.
yes, and
Issue of law and order should be separated with the disaster.
one of the thing probably in this whole conversation I missed out, forgot to mention. See, in this Disaster Management Act, one of the disastrous section is that very high degree of immunity given to the officials who are engaged with disaster management. They said that you can't even prosecute this or bring any action against these officials other than the Supreme Court and the High Court, right? That is there in the Disaster Management Act. No lower court is competent to take these cases, right? So this kind of high degree of immunity is unacceptable, right? So what will happen is that if you have this kind of high immunity, then there would be accountability would be less. And remember this one, this kind of high immunity is not for people who are at the center or the state level. Even at the district level also, you cannot go to the district court. So the act itself bars this one. One more thing is that, see, we have been talked about so much about false alarm, and if some there is a false like warnings, or the warnings are not appropriate, you can't take action against these officials who are responsible for them. So that kind of accountability is not good. Means this dilutes the process. Okay, with very little. See, it is peacetime or otherwise. Accountability for government official is the key. Then one more thing we also discussed is about the Epidemics Act that must go. Right?
That's no relevance. Yes.
This has no relevance. Then another thing is that we must put enough emphasis on public health. That's why I
Public care.
talked about
The
public
Tamil
health.
Nadu models.
Yes, Tamil Nadu model. So something on the Tamil Nadu model we should try to do it. Other thing is that whenever we are talking about this pandemic disasters, no, we should emphasize on long-term planning. Long-term planning, disease prevention. Kerala has already shown the way. See, another thing which also does otherwise good in terms of disaster management is Orissa. And Naveen Patnaik is very proactive on this.
Very effective, very efficient.
Yes, yes. So that is another thing, and few of the other things which has been missing is that individual autonomy, privacy, liberty. These things we must take into consideration. And as we discussed,
The lessons from the Bombay plague is very important, sir. That I will remember for my entire teaching
right.
career and all. That how we can connect the dots. That
Yes, yes.
see that experiment was that failed.
Right, right.
Bal
So
Gangadhar Tilak is still showing us the way, sir. Correct.
yes, yes, and see it went on to a assassination also. Right,
Yes,
it
sir.
was an assassination, right, and people were hanged. So there could be what will happen is that this kind of things could lead to public unrest. It could lead to
Public
public
under.
unrest, right? So that is, as I told you, that I liked some of the aspects of disaster management bill, sorry, the public health bill of 2017, and I think it should be adopted. And as I told you that in exceptional cases the center has been given power, right, in public interest. So that provision which you are talking about is there.
Is there, sir. Yes.
And so far the penal provisions are concerned, I am telling you that the Disaster Management Act itself is good enough. Right?
Sufficient.
Whatever it says, that are good enough. You don't need to bring in no more things into that. And finally, I will say that this ordinance was not required. We could have done it with that medical protection acts that are there. We have to enforce them. We have to enforce them. In fact, I was reading about on this medical protection act that one of the doctor from I think from Punjab, chairperson from the president or something, office bearer of this IMS, was saying that certain times you have to go with this copy of this act to the police station, because the police
They
even
don't know even that.
is there.
Lack of awareness, sir. The police
Yes.
personnel don't know about Disaster Management Act or any other act. They just go by IPC. That's how they have been trained.
Right. Okay,
Like
so
Sir Balraj Chauhan is always saying we have been talking too much about IPC and neglecting all other criminal statutes. So that is one unfortunate part about our criminal justice.
yes.
So thank you so much, sir, for talking. In this problematic times, in these troubled times, I wish you good health and good health to everyone in your family.
Thank you.
And you have given too much think about, to discuss about. Will be to have you in our university as well. We'll plan something bigger and greater. Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of my Vice Chancellor as well as on behalf of my center, hear from very soon again. I hope so, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hope to meet you sometime.
Yes, sure, sir. I'll be pleased. It will be an honor, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.